3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to Mission CTRL, Peralta Design's podcast on all things branding and digital marketing. Since 2008, Peralta Design has launched hundreds of brands with award-winning identities and websites. Join our hosts Ramon and Jorge as they use decades of combined experience to tackle topics with past clients, industry partners, and the rest of the PD crew. At Peralta Design, we launch brands. But for now, let's launch right into this episode of Mission CTRL.
Hey everybody, welcome to Mission CTRL, where we respect the grind and reclaim the American dream. I am your host, Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands. Today's guest is the new Vice President of Innovation, Strategy, and Advancement at the University of Bridgeport. She continues to oversee UB's Bauer Hall Innovation Center. She also leads the university's Government and External Affairs program, serving as the contact for the city, state, and federal officials. She served as director of the School of Business and launched UB's Student Entrepreneur Center in 2014. She's a member of UB's senior cabinet, reporting directly to President Danielle Wilkin. Please help me welcome the amazing and incredibly busy Elena Cahill. Welcome.
Thank you.
There's so much here that we're going to have to do this in parts, I think. It's going to be like part 1, part 2. So, because that's a lot. And kudos to you. You're an amazing person. I keep telling everybody here she's a beast. You guys can't wait to, I can't wait to introduce you to her. Tell us about yourself.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
The real Elena.
The real Elena.
As far back as you want.
My first career was being a hairdresser.
Wow.
That's the fun
That's
part.
a trivia question right there.
Right? I born in Bridgeport. Love Bridgeport. I love the University of Bridgeport. We were chatting a little bit before, and I was telling you that my brother went to the University of Bridgeport. I went to the University of Bridgeport. I actually started off at Rutgers University, chemistry major. Thought I loved it. Like in terms of the university, it was big in scale, but the classes were so big, 500 students in a class. And I would come up and visit my brother and be like, wait, his school is so much better than mine. I want to go to UB. And that's how I ended up at UB. And I ended up transferring in my undergrad years. I wanted to finish my undergrad very quickly because I didn't go right from high school. I was a hairdresser with a brief stint in New York City to be an esthetician. And then so I wanted to just really get through the law school and undergrad thing. And I came up to UB and finished up there and really fell in love with it. So I have 2 kids and I have 2 stepkids, so 4 kids altogether. And it's a great, big, wonderful, happy family full of diverse careers, which is really fun to watch. And we are also chatting because we have kids that are older. So I have kids, we have kids that work in fashion, kids that work in data science, kids that are accountants, and social workers. So we span the gamut of the world, which is really, really fun to watch all of them grow up to be whoever they want to be, you know, and do what they do. And I love that they all do something different because it keeps me a little bit in all those spaces, which is really kind of fun. So that's it. That's who I am. I am a person who practiced law for a long time. I love learning about businesses. I love creating businesses. And I love working with students.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, you said something there. I want to go back to it. Did you really say that you were at Rutgers, but you wanted to go to UB because it was better?
I did.
Like at one point was UB
Literally.
On that level, like it was better than Rutgers?
Academically, UB back in the 80s when I was there, academically, interesting enough, the School of Business was the only AACSB accredited School of Business in the area.
Wow.
And UB was hopping. I mean, the engineering school, everything. UB was a really, really good institution, very highly regarded. And as much as I knew, bear in mind, I'm a first-generation student, right? Like, my parents didn't go to college. What do I know about college? Right. I know that you go, you get a degree, you get a job.
Right.
And academically standing, probably if I was looking at papers somewhere, it would have said Rutgers was a better school. Academically, I think in reality, equally as good, if not in part better. And I'll say that because going to a school and having this point of context when you're in classes with 500 students and you're a number, literally, like you look
Just
outside on the wall.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. You're being taught by TAs. You're not being taught by the professors. Right. Nobody cares if you go to school, you don't go to school. Right. Where at UB, you literally had a faculty member that knew your name. You know, every class, somebody knew your name and cared. And if you found that you were studying and didn't get the grade you wanted, there was an accessible actual faculty member, not a TA, that was going to talk to you. So from that context, I would say yes. I mean, Rutgers is a bigger campus, a much bigger school, so there's more courses and degrees. But I came up and ended up transferring to UB and never looked back.
And the campus, we were sharing a little bit before in the green room about just the social life on campus was
so big.
Yeah.
So now dating myself, drinking age was 18 back then.
Okay.
So the actual student center had a bar, and that was all legit. Like you didn't have to worry about like how old you were, right? Because you were old enough. And yeah, I mean, it was a dance hall, it was a bar. There was bars all around, dance halls all around. You had one night of the week you could go to all the different places, you know. And because I was a hairdresser, it was kind of funny. I was supporting myself and paying for myself to go to school. And I was working at a bar in Westport, a Mexican place, during like as a real job, and then I was cutting hair in the dorm. You know, so like if I wanted to go out on Friday night,
you were hustling.
Exactly. Like you need to go out, you need some cash, $5 a haircut.
There you go.
Down at the end of the hallway in the dorm rooms, and you can make $20 and you're like, good, I'm good for the night. Let's go. That's a real story.
Yeah, it's awesome. Entrepreneurship right there.
Really. It's funny. All these parts of your life weave back together to make a fabric. It's fun.
Absolutely. And I can date myself a bit. I frequented Alberto's. It was still there.
It was so much fun.
It was. And you had the beach, you know, like, and going back to it being so renowned, you know, out of high school or in high school, I had attended RISD for some portfolio prep classes, and they prepared me for this Boston College, you know, art fair. Not Boston College, but it was in Boston, and it was a fair where you would go with your big portfolio and go table to table, and you could meet with the art departments of all these schools, and UB was there. And I remember going to that, you know, the booth, the table, and showing my portfolio. You know, and the professor's name escapes me, but he made an impact on me because he was able to identify one of my drawings. I had this study of an arm, like a really detailed forearm. And he said, Bridgman's Guide to Drawing from Life, page 54 or something like that. And I was like blown away. And he was like, you've got to draw from life, kid. You can't keep drawing out of a book. And and in the same breath, he said, I want to invite you down to campus. You know, and I didn't take it as an offense. I was actually impressed that he recognized my work from this book that I did have, and I did copy it from the book. And when I went down to campus, I fell in love with the campus. You know, I fell in love with Bridgeport, really. You know,
where are you from?
Providence.
Oh, nice. I love Providence.
Providence was very similar, except I felt like Bridgeport was even more progressive. It was diverse, but what I noticed right away were like the political signs had like Puerto Rican names on them. And a cop car drove by when I was on campus, and it was a black officer and a Puerto Rican officer. Little things like that I wasn't accustomed to in Providence. Now, Providence has come a long way, but it was a combination of feeling like, okay, I can live here. It's progressive. It's near New York, a couple hours away from home, and then they had a really, really well-known design program.
Yes.
You know, UB's, you know, I mean, it was just renowned. It was on par with all the best.
If we get to this part of the conversation where we talk about where the schools ended up, I will share that it's really just their design program was just fun, and the close people went to the design program, you know, without a doubt. And it's so part of life. And there's a hole right now, I think, without the design program being infiltrated within the school system. And design thinking would be, you know, from my vantage point, design thinking should be part of the MBA program.
Absolutely.
You know,
problem solving in a major way. Now, the robotics school was always winning awards when we were there, like industrial design. It was just always in the news and winning all types of competitions.
We have so many fun robotics. So robotics right now would probably be under the mechanical engineering department in the engineering school. Back then, I think the industrial design school was part of the engineering program. It moved over to being in the design building. But the making of really cool, fun things still takes place. And we have so many fun, you know, we have a yellow submarine, which is really cool, which is really, really fun. But we have a huge robotics. And I haven't sat on a PhD dissertation in probably a year, but most of those that I have sat on their committees are around robotics from the engineering school, something really cool, robotics.
Awesome. I want to get back to you. I mean, you're really a Renaissance woman with all these different things you did and tried, but the common thread there is that you're self-made, first generation like myself, and I had to become an RA because I needed to help pay for school and worked in school. But I love that. Now, you got your law degree from UB. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Law. So being first generation and incredibly, I want to say silly, maybe the word might be stupid at the time. I didn't know much about like what that really was going to entail. And I first was accepted out to California, to one of the California state schools for law school. And I was like, oh, this is great. I'll go to California. And in like 2 weeks, I'm like, I can't afford to live in California. I need to come back. And I had applied to UB and didn't accept my acceptance effectively. And, I thought I could just walk back into the classroom. And they're like, well, no, like we filled your spot. And I was like, oh, no, what do I do now? So I went and took a job clerking in a law firm, which is probably everything the way it's supposed to happen because I just didn't have any background or basis around law. And I don't know at the moment if I was going to school because I had the level of respect for the law that I probably have today. I think I might have been going more because I felt like I needed to still prove myself and still, here I am at that point in time, this really kind of young, small person with long, crazy, curly hair that nobody's taking seriously. And I'm like, I wanted people to take me seriously, and I think I felt that was a mechanism. That's what was going to happen. But
were you like inspired by when you worked in the as a clerk there? Did you look up to the lawyers or feel like they seemed important?
They did, and they really. I love the way their minds thought, and they were very logical and problem solving. You said problem solving before, and I felt like that's a really cool space, being able to help people and solve problems. And so what happened was I went to this professor who was a business law professor at UB, and I was like, can you help me? He walks me into the dean of the law school and was like, can you help her? And he ends up getting me in for January. So I have this period of time now, this window that I'm going to go work. And when I went to go clerk. And that was amazing because I think it made or break my ability to do well in law school because I got to see things and form some context around law that I would not have seen if I had just gone right to law school. So I started my first semester in January at night, so I kept that job until the following August when I went in the day. And yes, I incredibly respected the attorneys. I also got to learn that they were just really normal people. I think in my mind they were sort of untouchable, these doctoral degree folks that were, not from the world I was used to. And so there was a lot of positives that came out of that experience of not starting immediately. Yeah. And I now actually mentor some students that are, depending on the path and the progression, to get some of that real experience before you jump in 100%. Because the context you can get around working every day. I don't care if you work in the mailroom. If you're working in an environment every day, you're going to hear terminology. You're going to see behaviors. You're going to just have this intrinsic learning that you're not going to have if you just start right at school and you don't get that context. So, yes, it ended up being, I think, the best thing. And I went to law school. And I ended up practicing law, like traditional law, being an attorney, corporate attorney. I love numbers. I love science. So I'm definitely I'm not a writer. People will probably wrap fish in what I write. They don't really hire me to write. But I am more science number oriented and acclimated. So that was my practice. I had to practice a law until in the year 2000. I was in Bermuda on a moped, and I overshot a corner and drove myself into a truck and broke my body.
Oh my God!
And that's really where a lot of the transitions start happening.
It was like one of those spiritual awakenings.
Literally, I was like, "Whoa, what do I do now?" So broken. So it was my fault.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like didn't see that coming. And so I was in a wheelchair for a bit. Like my mom.
And just being in another country's like medical system can be.
Which, thank goodness, I was so fortunate. I was in Bermuda, and the orthopedic at the ER was a John Hopkins trained orthopedic. Thank goodness. But like it was like legit seriousness. So at my scene, they brought a doctor out, like in case they were going to pronounce me dead.
Are
and
you
I was
serious?
like, yeah, like it was that hardcore. And I was like,
were you unconscious?
Not in the beginning. Like at first, when it first happens, you just feel like water all over your body, and you see like arms and teeth and bones that you're not supposed to see, and you're just kind of like, like you're just thinking to yourself, like, am I going to survive right now? And so I'm literally like thinking, like, I wonder what happens right now. Like, where does this go? And then I woke up, like a day and a half later, all in pain
patched
and messed up.
Oh my
And I remember the person I was with having to call my family and start the conversation with like, she's alive.
Oh,
you know,
my
like,
gosh.
which is, never what your family wants to hear. Then I stayed there until I got stable and got flown up to Yale and finished up a lot.
Did you have a long road of like
Yeah.
PT and stuff?
I had a year of 7 operations, and and it, it's all on my dime because it's like my fault. So that was my transitioning out of the day-to-day practice of law, and where I got into. Well, I was home, right? So like my mouse wire, my arm, my legs, everything's broken. And as I'm going through other operations and recovering, I have a whole lot of time to think. And my kids are young; they're 4 and 7 at the time, and people would just come and ask me questions, and I had all the time in the world to think about them. So I would think about business more holistically, and that's where I got into more creative forms of innovation. And, when you're practicing law, I was doing a lot of corporate reorganizations. So I was always of like the system of a business type of person. Right. And this let me sort of branch out even farther than that and get a little bit more creative with things and say, okay, well, if we're getting out of just the legal world, maybe you should consider doing X, Y, Z, whatever that might have been for the client, which led me to becoming a business consultant. And that led to me working on projects that I never would have seen coming. I created a med spa salon on Sunset Boulevard in LA. I've created a tequila that you can go buy in the store today. I've created all kinds of fun things just because people would come to me and say, can you help me? And then I started really getting this like entrepreneurial bug, like, oh my gosh, like I love creating something from nothing. Like it's so much fun. Yeah. And so that's really the origin of entrepreneurship for me.
Wow.
Drive yourself into a truck and see what happens. So,
Well, we won't recommend that path.
Correct.
But
sorry.
But it did work out for you, and we're happy. We're so glad you're still here.
That's how it all came to be.
But did anyone in your family inspire you to the entrepreneurship, like your dad or your mom, or were they?
No, to the contrary, actually. They're very
the kind of factory
old,
kind of.
Yes, exactly. Old world folks that were sort of, you're a hairdresser, you don't need to do anything else.
Right.
Like, why are you even going to college?
Right.
And you're a woman, you're a hairdresser, you should get married and have kids and call it a day. I don't come from the environment of entrepreneurism at all, but I think that over the course of evolution and then watching my life and seeing later on. I mean, Ramon, you get this. I mean, back in those days, there were no college degrees. There was no classes in entrepreneurship. Right. There wasn't this wasn't cool back then. Back then, you're a gypsy. Right. Like, you're supposed to go work in a job and stay there for 30 years. Right. And if you get a watch, or I don't know what you get after a long period of time, that was your goal.
Yeah.
So people...
That was success.
Correct. Exactly. And the idea of having interest in multiple industries or finding joy in learning continually wasn't so much... you're fighting being a woman. You're fighting being first generation. And you're fighting the fact that you just don't want to work in the same job 8 to 5 every day.
There's a stigma to that.
So all of that put together, thank God I had the JD, or I don't think anyone would have given me any respect.
Right.
So, that's where you were.
But did you feel a sense of like, I've got a second chance here, that I'm not going to squander it, I'm going to do as much as I can, or I'm going to, I mean, because like that awakening, it did make you think creatively, but it also must have been like, well, I must be here for a purpose.
Yes, without a doubt. I think about that often, actually, my purpose, because I think I've liked every job I've ever had. Everything I'm doing, I usually enjoy what I'm doing when I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. So whether I'm practicing law or owning an energy company, which I end up creating, or raising my kids or being with the kids, whatever it is, wherever I am, I'm usually trying to be very present in that situation. And I think that deepened after the accident, which was be present in whatever it is at the moment you're doing. And I, generally speaking, find joy in the things I'm doing, but sometimes I could be preoccupied with something else I should be doing, or, where I try to really take a breath and really be present and be in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to transition back to life at UB, because you've done so much there. You clearly have a passion for entrepreneurship, but also for these students. Yeah. How did you, you're a business consultant. How do you make your way back towards UB?
When I moved back from LA, from those projects, my daughter was starting high school here. And so the kids had moved to LA with me, and we moved back. I kept my house here. The same law professor I'm telling you about called me up and said, will you teach business law? And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to. And I fell in love with teaching. Like, I fell in love with the students. I fell in love with everything about that. And that was probably 2006 when they asked that. And after maybe like 8 years or so, they invited me to come on full time. He was retiring. So the JD at the School of Business, the doctoral full-time person, was retiring after 40-something years, and he's like, do you want to take my spot? And I ended up taking his spot. And I loved that. And then I was sharing with you, I started teaching along those 8 years or 10 years business planning classes, and students would be in the business planning class, and sometimes they would want to create the business, and they're like, well, what do we do? And I'm like, great question, what do you do? So I'm like, let's start a student entrepreneur center. So we created a student entrepreneur center, and that was super fun. In the beginning, I had to recruit a lot of friends as volunteers to do it. And
Did you model it after another program anywhere else?
I certainly looked at a lot of them.
Yeah.
I created a book with like 25 of them.
Okay.
25 different entrepreneur programs throughout the country to see what they were like, how were they funded. And then Ernie Treves was still alive.
Yes.
I think you know Treves.
Yep.
Yes.
They're a
So
big
he was
donor to
Yeah.
the school, yeah.
And he's just so, like, he's a true entrepreneur, never went to college a day in his life. Like, he's an immigrant and entrepreneur. It was really, he's just a
And
wonderful
do they own all the
inspiration.
McDonald's? Or
A lot. I
yeah.
think like 40 plus. They're
Yeah.
just right now selling the Holiday Inn downtown. They own the
Oh,
Holiday Inn.
wow.
And they're becoming apartments, just so you know, if you didn't read this in the paper now, so I could say it. But Ernie was someone to look up to and respect. Not only was he a gentleman, he was a genuine good person and entrepreneur, and really believed in entrepreneurship and business. And he was my supporter. And he funded me for the beginning of this. And he and I had to negotiate this, right? Like, to try negotiating with Ernie Treves. And the dean and the president at the time were like, yeah, you could talk to him, but like, you have to do it. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like, I would like 3 years. I prepared my business plan.
Was it Salonen or no?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
And
Neil.
yes, Neil Salonen, Lloyd Gibson, and myself. And then they leave me. They're like, you have to do it. So I'm talking to Ernie, and he's like, I want 3 years of money. And he's like, well, you start it, and I'll give you money after the first. I'm like, I can't start it without the money. Come on. And he was wonderful. And we
You went
compromised
face
on
to
a
face
year.
with like a
Face to
master
face,
businessman.
yes, with Ernie Treves. And he gave me a year's money, and he said, let's see, I'll give you a year of funding and see what happens.
Yeah.
And he just really has supported us ever since. And we would bring him in. So that experience was just like truly mind-blowing. I was sharing with you earlier, the first cohort of students that came through that year, there's a gentleman who lives in Fairfield now, and he was from Egypt, and his family wasn't here at the time. He was here on a student visa. He created a business in our center, did OPT in his business, applied for an E2 visa and got it, brought his family here, ends up with a green card, and he and his wife and 3 kids live in Fairfield, still working in that business that he created at the center, like our first
That's
go
got to
around.
be so rewarding.
Oh, it's like amazing. And he's like a peer now. Like, it's not even like he was ever a student.
Right.
But we have so many stories. I had a gentleman this past August come back. He was part of the first group. He was an electrical engineer from Jordan, went back to Jordan, started a solar company. And now he has over 30 employees today. Came back here this year because his wife's doing the electrical engineering program. And this guy is running a full-blown operation and supporting families on the business started at the center. It's crazy.
That's amazing.
So here we are. And that's how we started the center, and that's how we've been able to survive. And then the Bauers, George and Carol Bauer, also equally as wonderful, divine people, came in and took this building, Bauer Hall, which was, horrible at the moment when they first came, and they renovated that whole building for our innovation center. Our first building, we were kind of borrowing on space on campus, wasn't so great, but this building is like incredible. And that's thanks to the Bauers. So the Bauers funded the building for us, and the Trevs are still funding the actual Student Entrepreneur Center for us. And we're still here and kicking all these years later, creating businesses.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's fun. Really fun. Good stuff.
So we launch brands here, but it sounds like you're launching brands at UB as well. I mean, this is...
Well, we're not this creative, so we have to refer people.
There's definitely some synergy here, so I'm looking forward to getting more involved there with that,
Oh my
because
gosh.
UB,
Me too. I'm looking for you to come in.
yeah, well, you were there for the commencement, so you heard the long story. But
Yes.
UB is always going to have a place in my heart.
It's that kind of a place, right?
It is.
Now, you met your wife there?
Yes, I did.
So just as a side note, you should have gotten an email asking about that story, because on Valentine's Day, we're going to do a little something
Okay.
about the people who
I'll
met
look
there.
for it.
You need to send us your story.
Yes.
Because there's so many people who met and have like these lifelong relationships
Yeah.
from UB, which is really sweet.
It's just kismet or the universe or whatever you want to call it. But I ended up there, met her, and we're still married,
I love
going
it.
on 30 years.
It's insane,
2
right?
kids. It is.
So it is that it is a special place for
It
people.
is.
And maybe that's not totally atypical. Maybe people who go to any school and they meet the person that they're spending
Yeah.
time with there at that school, they really feel that connection. But we certainly have those stories at UB, and it's
Yeah.
really sweet.
And you've managed to go survive because you've gone through some tumultuous times. When I was saying when I graduated, we had the picketing going on during commencement, and now there, like Shine Hall's no longer there. The campus is transformed. We've had different leadership.
Yeah.
What's been your secret for, say, survival, but being a constant that I think has we're so grateful for that. Let me put it that way, because you being a constant there has kept UB what it is despite everything it's gone through.
Well, thank you for saying that, and I will share that I'm probably one of, 100 or 200s, but I think that is kind of the feeling. The feeling was that from a practical point of view, you're saying, well, I might be saying, I don't want to speak for other people, I might be saying to myself, what am I doing? I could be making 2-3 times what I'm making here, working in industry, or going back to my business or something like that. And, the days are tough. There have been tough days.
Mm-hmm.
And the flip side of it is, how could you leave these students right now? How could you ever leave? And I am a person of pretty good stability. So like in sense of, if I create a program and it's going to be a lunch and learn, we're going to do that every semester. And I don't care what's happening, and I don't care if the world's blowing up around you, we're going to keep our programs.
You're committed and you're going to see it through.
And I think that was the feeling that kind of always won was, if you leave and you leave these programs, where's the stability? Where are the building blocks? What are they building from? And we need to keep stability. So there are a large, more than a handful of people. There's quite a good number of people who I think took that position and stayed the course and really helped lay that foundation of a fabric so that the new institution coming in could be building off of it. Because when faculty leave, and again, not something I think I consciously thought of years ago, but faculty are the bones of an institution that your job is education and the customer is a student. You needed to kind of be there. So some people left by choice, some people left not by choice. But it's something that I think I'd be lying if I said it wasn't going through your head. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you sticking this out for? And then a student walks in the door, or a student emails you, or, I got my husband wrapped into teaching there. I don't know if I left this part out. So remember I said we were volunteering at the
you were
Student
pulling in
Entrepreneur
volunteers,
Center.
yeah.
So my husband's a CPA, and when I first took the job full time at the university, he was all mad at me. He's like, what are you going to go work for that paycheck for? I'm like, well, you don't know. Like, you don't teach. It's really awesome. You'll love the kids. So only when he started helping did he fall in love with the students. And then, unfortunately, one of our accounting faculty fell ill with cancer. And we needed an immediate person to jump in. And I asked my husband, I'm like, can you fill in? He's like, I don't know how to teach. I'm like, sure you do. Come on. And, he's a CPA. He's working in the Big Fours. He's done international acquisitions. He's really bright. And I'm like, you got this. Well, he still teaches there till today. And he loves the students. So that was the other common bond we had, which is that we have students at our house. We have students over for holidays, summer events. And it is part of our whole family fabric now. So even though he didn't go there, like you with your wife, who you both met there, he's become part of the fabric, which also I think helped during these really hard times. Having both of us in that same environment with the students and prioritizing the students, I think really helped to keep us grounded there.
Well, I want to there's so much on I can't imagine your business card probably doesn't fit everything on here. Like, they've given you like 10 jobs. You have like the government. You're talking to the city officials and all this. Like, I'm reading this. I'm like, she's so soft spoken. How did she get this?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
This
That's
position.
just something the higher ups thought of. I think this is.
You'd be good for this here. Everybody steps back.
I think it's based on, in between everything we're talking about, I created a few energy companies.
Okay.
And I think part of it is I've been in the state of Connecticut most of my life, almost my whole life, just for short stints on projects outside. And over the course of time and having a business myself, I think I just got to know a lot of people in the state. And I think this part of the role is not probably because I really want to seek out working with government people. I think it's more just because I have a lifetime of being in Connecticut and starting businesses and understanding the culture and regulatory environments and things like that. So, yeah, I found it curious, too. I'm like, oh, me? But the innovation makes sense. Yeah. I'm really, really excited that they asked me to work on the strategic plan. That's, after everything that's happened, I think it'll be really, that's probably going to be one of the most rewarding parts of this. I feel like the innovation part is stable. We've been doing that.
You got that.
The government relations part, I'm still putting my head around. And this part of strategic planning is really inspiring.
The advancement.
Or not the advancement part, the actual, like, we're going to help create the strategic plan.
Got
so,
it.
like, I'll be part of that. And that's something that I don't know that I realized I wanted to do, but now knowing how excited I am towards doing it, because now over all these years and seeing the changes and knowing a lot of the people on campus and helping put a voice to everybody's thoughts and create a real strategic plan seems super, like, I'm really looking forward to that part of the work.
How does Goodwin play into UB's future?
A lot, I think. And I think that's a good thing. Goodwin bought UB, so it's a wholly owned subsidiary. They created a new entity. It's a wholly owned subsidiary. And there is a governance for UB and a governance for Goodwin, and there's a joint governance.
Okay.
Which is really cool. So I think if we look at it, in my mind, I almost do a Unilever situation, right? If you look at Unilever buying Ragu and Ben & Jerry's and their various brands,
right,
there's effectively a Goodwin holding. And Goodwin has schools from pre-K all the way to high school. They have their college. They have a real estate portfolio. They have UB. They have other technical schools. So if you sort of envision maybe the traditional, more corporate structures, right, with holdings and coming down, we're part of that. But we do need to roll up into their master plan. So the movement in education is very interesting right now. Higher education, there's a lot of conversations around people can't afford to go get those 4-year degrees, either in economic or time. And we need these shorter credentialing processes. Well, they sort of had that already with advanced manufacturing. So they were already in that vein of 6-month programs or certificate programs, things of that nature. So I see a lot of really good things. We carry a little bit deeper accreditation, engineering, business PhD programs. They carry the earlier part of it in some regards. And I love seeing that spectrum. So if a person, let's go to manufacturing, you created that very wonderful Make It in Connecticut website. And we talk about manufacturing. So if somebody's in manufacturing and wants to get upskilled, they may not need a 4-year degry. They may want a 6-month certificate. Right. But if they decide they like it or want to further their education, we could take them all the way through. So I don't know, again, I can't say the first 10 minutes of this whole thing happening, I kind of understood it all. Or maybe not that I didn't understand it. I think maybe I didn't see the potential. But now I look at it like we'll be able to service in this world of education someone coming in right from a high school or an adult learner that's going to transition.
Yeah, because their students skew older.
Yes.
And I think the initial reaction was, oh no, it was mourning. It was like, we're going to lose UB. But if you look at where universities are trending, a lot of economists or these guys that try to predict, they think of it as like a death march for universities, the traditional university, because enrollment keeps declining. So what you're saying makes sense, that it's actually good in the long term, because it sounds like Goodwin was already employing some of these strategies that I think can solve some of these challenges that the traditional universities are going to face or are already facing.
Exactly. It's I have to say, it's the more every day I learn a little bit more, and every day I like it. And I see that whether consciously or not, it's where we are today. And now, again, throw COVID in the middle and just all these different changes. So theoretically, there are just less people college age right now. And that trend's going to continue, I think, another 6 or 8 years, that we're going to have less people even in the pool of being able to go to college. And then you have these complications. COVID's a complication, a significant complication, actually. You have this skill set training where people, I don't want to say kids, but I generally say kids, but that's probably not correct, is, I could go and learn computer science in 2 years. I don't need a 4-year degree, and I can go get a job making 6 figures, because it's so in demand. Second one, I'm going to have a job. Do I need this 4-year degree? So I think we're going to see a lot of changes, and I think they'll work themselves out and stabilize. But I do think higher education is going to look a little bit different every day that goes on. But I think the core root of education will remain the same. Yeah. So I think Goodwin's a good fit for that.
Good, and I'm just glad you're there.
Thank you.
I feel like we have some of the good guys are still there, and I want to, as we wind down, I want to make sure I give you time to tell us about these cohorts, because we talked a little bit about my activity with Reset, and you're doing something very similar. Let's kind of wrap up with like telling our listeners about this program, how they can apply, what kind of grant money is available, because I think that's really valuable for those entrepreneurs out there listening.
So thank you. We were fortunate and received a grant from the city of Bridgeport, we being the University of Bridgeport. The University of Bridgeport applied to the city of Bridgeport for a grant through the Economic Development Division, and it came in from federal funding because of COVID. And we created a program, accelerator/incubator, for businesses that are in Bridgeport. So people either live in Bridgeport or the businesses in Bridgeport. And what we're doing is we're starting a program, a cohort. Our first cohort is going to start this Monday, but we have 3 years of funding. And we are taking these companies that are already in existence, so they're not at ideation, they're already companies that do something. They must have some revenue. And we're taking them and helping them get stable and very well rooted and then scale. So every company comes to us from a different place, and we have very diverse companies, which is wonderful. So we have a cohort of 12 that will start on Monday. They'll have weekly education. They'll have weekly one-on-one mentoring. They get co-working space in the Innovation Center, as well as grant money. So we have up to $7,000 of grant money per company. They need to complete a third of the program. The program is almost 40 weeks, so they need to do the first third of the program in order to apply. But what that will mean is that their mentors will work with them in identifying the best use of the money. So this morning I was interviewing a company, and in fact, they have been operating, but they don't have a legal entity. So certainly that's something that they could put their money towards.
Right.
But every company will be different, and every company is going to have different needs. And as they work with their mentors, they'll be able, I think, to really prioritize how that money should be spent. And we're keeping a lot of data, tracking the data, coming in, and we'll have 4 data polls. And hopefully we'll be able to see at the end of this that we've made a difference. And the goal is rooting them in Bridgeport, making sure they're stable, connecting them with a community of peers. You know, I feel like when people start businesses, it's very lonely. You and I both started businesses. You can't tell your employees what the problems are. So helping them find a leadership peer group, helping them learn about the ecosystem in the state that we have support for companies, SBDC, DCD, SBIR, there's an alphabet soup of support. And giving them a home, in Bridgeport on campus with the Innovation Center. So we're really excited. This will be our first cohort. We'll be able to do 3 of them.
All right. And how do people apply? Sure. And you mentioned like some of the requirements. They need to, the business has to be established. They need to be making some money. It could be any type of business.
Any type of business. And we have a website. So it's www.bridgeportaccelerator.com. And they go on, they submit onto the website, and that will come into us, and then we call them for an interview.
And when's the next cohort? When that happen? It'll
start next January, but we hope to start it a little bit earlier in January. So we will be out for companies in November. So November of 2022, we will start the process of searching companies again. It's a little bit different than most of the accelerators in the state. It's a little bit longer an accelerator, but we're going to try this model with the hope that we really get to develop an ecosystem in Bridgeport. And get these fundamental cohorts also helping others the year after, mentoring companies the year after.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I think that's going to be, of use to a lot of our listeners to sign up for that, because I know that New Haven's doing something, Hartford's doing something.
Correct.
It's really good.
Stanford's doing something.
Yeah.
Now Bridgeport's doing something.
We got to keep Bridgeport on the map.
Really, exactly.
Absolutely.
Light it up.
Absolutely. So fire up our listeners. Like, what is something that, because you've been through it, you literally survived all kind of things, the Bermuda thing, which was a pivot in your life, and then all these different businesses. What's a piece of advice you could share to our entrepreneur listeners out there that are, maybe need to get a fire lit under them?
Oh, very cool. So a couple things. One thing is I am very much a read and learn and stay the course person. So I make decisions, I will pivot, but I try to make them carefully. So in the heat of emotion, don't make a decision. You know, like if you're very emotional about something, take a breath and read. You know, get out of your head, get out of thinking, go grab a book and do something that's going to be helpful and take you out of the space your head's in at the moment. I think in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of emotion because there are a lot of challenges. And everyone's problem is your problem. Every problem in the business is your problem. There's so much you're carrying that sometimes I think entrepreneurs get overwhelmed. So take a breath, but when you're breathing, don't get on social media. Don't bitch. Excuse me, can I say that word? You know, read a book, be productive. Old-fashioned reading to me is like therapy. So that's I think the best thing, and really just try to make decisions with a clear head and not with emotion.
Awesome advice. Thank you, Elena, for being here. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Your place is amazing, by the way. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Mission Control. Until next time, this is Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands.
Thank you for taking this journey with us. To learn more about Peralta Design and our work, go to www.peraltadesign.com and subscribe to keep up with the crew.